And I think we're live. So hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Rick Adams from practicalcsm.com. Pleased to have you with us. And you'll see we've got a poll going. Our conversation is about security. So I've just put a poll in there. So as you come in, if you want to answer the poll, feel free to do so. Just asking about your own company's portfolio and how much relevance security has to your portfolio. That'll be of interest. I'll close that in a little bit. But in the meantime, let me just introduce you to our guest for today, which is Dario Cavallaro. So, Dario, a very warm welcome to yourself. Dario is leader customer success security group for the Cisco EMEA region. He is UK based. On LinkedIn, he describes himself as an ambitious, curious, and security-oriented IT professional with worldwide experience. And he is an experienced trainer and technical project manager. So today's topic is customer success in the security industry. And of course, I'm going to be chatting with Dario all the way through. But just before I do that, I just want to take you through let me just share my screen for one moment, if I may. And I just want to take you through to this page here, just so you're aware. This is on our website, the series that we're doing, Coffee Bar Conversations Live with Rick Adams. And of course, today's event is on here with Dario, which you can see there. Just so you're aware, we have other guests coming up, and you can see the replays from previous events, and Dario's will go in next. And then next month's event there with John and others afterwards. So feel free to register. So again, I'm just going to stop sharing. And what I will do is I will put that link in the chat window for you. Let me go to the chat window. There we go. And put that link in there so that you can access that. So, okay, great. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. So let's start for proper. So again, warm welcome to you, Dario. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Rick. Good. Thanks for having me. And good to be here.
Likewise, I've been looking forward to this actually for ages. We've organised it a while back, haven't we? So it's been in the diary for quite a long time, and I've been looking forward to it because, of course, as you know, and I think quite a lot of people know, I've got a little bit of a history with Cisco and many fond memories. I've met hundreds, if not thousands, of Cisco employees, certainly thousands of Cisco reseller employees, done a lot of training for Cisco and for Cisco resellers in, I counted up, it was 30 countries that I visited over a period of 6 years. So as you can imagine, lots of fond memory of sitting, waiting for hours at airports. So,
yes, I know that
well. Which I think also is something that you also have experienced. Is that right?
And enough to be able to talk about it.
So that's one thing I don't miss, about COVID-19. I mean, travel's like a double-edged sword, right? So it has most definitely opened my mind. I've definitely learned so much from visiting so many different countries that I would not be the person I am today if I hadn't have had those experiences. Doing it for work forced me to do it, but it's been a real eye-opener. It's been most definitely a very enjoyable part of my career, and I'm sad, that people can't do it anymore, right? I mean, it is particularly for young people. I hope this is not going to be long term, because the opportunities for travel and meeting other cultures and understanding things from a different perspective, it's great.
I fully agree with that sentence. It's a great learning experience traveling. Not only about the people and the way they behave, but also about the different things that people or different ways that people interpret the way you say things. So
absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right. And because we're so embedded in our own culture, I think sometimes when somebody's expressing themselves a different way, because culturally they express it a different way, it goes through the assumptions and we actually listen. If that makes sense. But anyway, we're getting philosophical. Let's get on to what we're meant to be talking about here. So as I said, for those who are arriving, please do complete the poll on the relevance to the security industry to you, just out of curiosity. Please do also go to the chat window and feel free to contribute any thoughts or comments or observations you may have throughout, and any questions you may have for myself or for Dario as well, just put them in there. We will pick them up probably towards the end rather than during the conversation, just so it doesn't interrupt the flow. But you might think of a question right now that you might not remember at the end. Feel free to put it in whenever you want. So please do use the poll. Please use the chat window. That would be great. And our topic for today is customer success in the security industry. But before we get into that, Dario, would you mind just giving us a quick sort of intro as to who you are and where you've come from and how you ended up being who you are now?
Sure. Thank you very much, Frick. So my history in the IT world started roughly 15 years ago. I classic evolution from a technical engineer towards services, towards the customer success motions, with a vision on the business, or rather an understanding of the business outcomes for customers. So with that piece in mind, I landed through different changes into the old Lancope, and that was acquired by Cisco. And there I was given the opportunity to lead a team in EMEA and across EMEA and PJC that was working on customer success management. And from that, obviously, the position evolved.
And when was that roughly?
So the acquisition happened in 2015, and the position was made available roughly between 2016 and 2017. And that position obviously evolved, and Cisco keeps evolving. From that point of view, obviously there are different topics and different things that one can say, but definitely Cisco is one of those places where you have the feeling of community. So definitely a good experience.
No, I agree, actually. I never was employed by Cisco. I was a red badge holder for several years. And I had the privilege of working. I told you, I think off air, there's 30 offices that I've worked in. And I always got the impression that people worked for Cisco because they wanted to work for Cisco. So it was their choice to do so. And they very much had a belief in the, if you like, in the Cisco vision and mission, which I think is something that Cisco as an organization and its employees, should rightly be proud of.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so so did you have anything else or you wanted to add on to your intro?
So lately we had an evolution in the Cisco world where the security world became more prominent in a sense, and obviously, as one would expect, Cisco keeps improving and evolving. So we are heading towards more changes into that space. And the Cisco security part of Cisco is certainly becoming an interesting place where to be.
Cisco, okay, let's talk about that as a really good introduction into our topic, because to me, obviously from a Cisco perspective, Cisco has a really broad portfolio of products and services that it offers. They've always been known as being sort of like on-prem product, gear that you install and configure, and you might remotely manage it, but a lot of it is routers and switches and firewalls and servers and so on. But in actual fact, for many years, Cisco's revenues have been higher from its software than from its hardware, correct?
That's correct, and obviously the transition, which has been highlighted through many channels, is happening as we speak, and Cisco is steering towards more of a software company.
Absolutely, and also not just a software company, but a service company, right?
Correct.
So it's not that you purchase it, you hire it, as it were.
Correct.
Okay, which gives the customer a lot more agility, because they can purchase what they need this year and don't have to worry so much about what they need in 5 or 6 years' time and how they're going to make sure they get the ROI over any massive 5-6 year investment. When we all know that, like, these days, so many organizations couldn't possibly plan for 5-year periods, because they have no idea what their business is going to need in 5 years' time. And I think actually security as one particular sort of aspect of technology in particular, how do you know what security is going to be the right security in 5 years' time? Is it possible? I would say no.
It's really hard. We have seen with all the different attacks and evolution of platforms, and between pandemic, Hafnium is the buzzword of the moment in security. So all these things have made networks evolve, and as such made obviously security evolve as a consequence. And so I think you said it right. Many companies don't know where they will be in 5-6 years, so they need to focus on now, on the moment where they are and where they can get the best out of it.
So would you say, Dario, that when a customer is making a decision around security, actually they're not making a decision around a security product, but around a security product provider, a vendor? And what they're doing is they're not saying, I want you because this product is the right product for us, but actually I want you because I trust your approach and your holistic capability within security, and I feel comfortable that you're the one that I want to partner with over a number of years and invest in, and trust that you're going to come up with whatever is needed. And you don't know what that is, and I don't know what that is, and nobody knows what it is. But I think that you're the one who's going to, as best as we can know right now, be the right partner to jump into bed with.
You use the right words. Trust and partnership are the two words that are most important in security in general, and especially coming from a CS motion, or if you expand that to a CX motion. Obviously, it is extremely important that customers that buy, and we're talking about customers from a vendor perspective, but we'll talk about also what I found in general, or what my experience was. Customers buy because they trust the company, and one way of building trust is obviously the customer-facing teams. And when it comes to the customer-facing teams, obviously, you want that team to be able to understand the customer environment, the customer, or the business outcomes that customers want to reach, and make sure that there is that conversion or translation from technical discussion to business outcome type of discussion. Which is always hard to get. But I think when that happens successfully, obviously there is the best outcomes for both parts. As we said, it's a partnership in everything, in every single detail. It's a partnership for vendors to build up better products, and it's a partnership for customers or partners to get the best out of the solutions that they buy, obviously. And that's something really I've heard for, I guess, most of the CS in general. I mean, I'm talking from a personal perspective, right? In general, going beyond the Cisco word and what the job is, I guess the CS motion is more of an attitude where you really want to make sure that you are helping people to get the best out of the situation where they are in, which is extremely important. And in security, even more. Most of the CS manager I worked with have interacted with customers, like they were owning that network, and they were trying to make the best decision for the customers.
So if we draw an analogy between, and this is good, you're going to wince at this, okay? So because of your technical experience, please bear with me, and I'm going to put this in very crude terms. But you could argue that one difference between, let's say, purchasing a firewall and purchasing a router, right, is that you could, in theory, you could do the self-configuration on a router, and it will work. and it may not be optimized so that you get the maximum performance out of your network, but it will do the job. Whereas with a firewall, if you don't have an expert helping you to set it up to its maximum, you leave gaps and you could be hacked, and that's that.
Yes, and nowadays the networks are far more complex than firewalls, right? You have all sorts of
course, and
things in the network.
but I'm just trying to get the sort of the security difference
Yes.
here. Is it's not just about having a product.
No, not at all. It's about product, it's about services, it's about continuous interaction, continuous checks, and more importantly, establishing a journey,
Right.
and an objective or a vision.
Yes.
And that's where CS, and especially in security, the collaboration becomes important. And when you say collaboration, obviously you extend that to a concept of trust, if you want.
Right.
Because I found that especially in security, relationships are extremely important.
Yes.
And when you come to relationships, there is that base of trust element.
So they're not going to let you in. They're not going to tell you the truth if they don't trust you in the first place. And you can't give them best advice unless they will tell you the truth. So that establishment of trust in a CS role in security is really the be all and end all, isn't it? It's so important.
Exactly. And the same happens inside corporates or companies, depending on how you want to call it, based on which part of the word you are. But what is important is, what I've seen important is that the people that work in the security industry, whether they work for a vendor or are managing actually security in a company, have changed that role from normal technical advisors to trusted advisors, and that's the next level up.
Yes.
That again, that element of trust becomes extremely important, because otherwise things won't happen easily. And
just to explain for those who aren't in security, is that may not. I mean, it's obvious once it's said, but perhaps may not be obvious without thinking of it. Is that information about security breaches, about attempts, about the types of issues that a large corporation is experiencing? They do not want the public to know this information. Okay, they really do not want it to get out into the press about the types of pressures that they're under and the types of problems that they're experiencing. So how can they? So it's very difficult almost for a customer to open up even to their supplier, who, as we've already said, we need to move from supplier to partner for this to work. But to be that trusted partner in security, I think is even harder than in most sort of industries that we see technology going into, because it's very, very sensitive information.
Yes, and even one would think NDAs and other legal agreements are still half of the picture. That trust bit is extremely important, and that's depending on the teams, depending on how the CS organizations are set up, especially for security, is extremely important to establish the relationship with the customers you will be working with, especially the top customers or top stakeholders, as I call them, because, as we said, it's a partnership.
So at what stage, Dario, do you in the CS team first get involved with a new customer? Is it after the contract's been signed, or do you actually get some line of sight with them and maybe a meeting where you're in front of them and talking to them prior to that?
So my personal experience in general has been that I've been able to gain the trust of the sellers in general, either partners or direct sellers or distributors, and the teams I've worked with always have introduce the figure of the customer success manager as an added value for
Great.
the deal.
That's really good.
And that brings us back to that element of trust, where if they trust you, doors open. If they don't, obviously, doors will open, but it's a little bit more difficult. And that I guess, all from what I've seen, it all boils down to obviously the person, the knowledge that the person has, and the soft skills that the person has. Because it's never either one or the other. It's the whole package that is extremely important.
That's really interesting. And so what I'm getting to here is this is my belief, and I think it's perhaps even more clear in security than it may be in general. Okay, is that customer success is an essential part of the sale itself. It's what the customer buys. They don't buy the product which comes with customer success. They actually buy a combination of the product and the services that surround it that enable that product to actually be of any value in the first place. And the decision to purchase it may actually come from, well, we met the CSM and we felt, yeah, that's a guy I can trust, or lady I can trust, I can work with, and I feel confident that I'm safe in their hands.
Yep. Yeah. And as I keep saying, it's extremely important to be open in a sense, and to, it's not important whether a problem happens or not, because nowadays problems happen. It's extremely important to understand how people react to problems.
How you deal with it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Great point.
Which sometimes get a little bit overlooked. But when you get to a situation where you have your customer success organization in front of the customer, and the customer isn't, or the partner or whoever is using actually the product, is providing feedback about the product, that's where it becomes important that the customer success manager or role has that link back into the company to provide feedback to the business owners.
Yes, definitely.
Because customer success, again, my personal opinion is a whole motion of a whole company. It's not a one-off person. It's product development in case of vendors that build the product and listen to the feedback that is coming from the field. And it's not only about the new features that will make the product actually better, but it is also to make those features that are in the product better, that will allow actual users of the product to increase their comfort levels with the product itself. And that can be anything from learning experiences or videos, trainings, how you want to call it, to sessions, webinars, anything that can help make the experience with the product better will eventually contribute towards a successful partnership.
Well, I think that's quite profound, coming from somebody who works for a $20 billion turnover company with 200,000 employees, who we would not normally think of as being agile, right? But there you are, very much expressing how important that agility, the ability to listen, the ability to absorb, and the ability to change and adapt based upon the feedback that comes in. Even in a company of that size, it's recognized. We can see that, and I think that's really profound.
Yeah. Obviously, no place is perfect, but certainly, again, how you react to situations is what is important and what counts in life. But yeah, from another personal point of view, I will add that the customer success team, when it interacts with the customers, or when product owner interacts with their stakeholders, I shall say, they can be provided in advance with certain possible scenarios, configurations, or things that have been experienced with the product. This, for some, and I've been talking and discussing with peers in the industry for resources to suggest the right way.
Mm-hmm.
There are ways to predict those things, and there are ways to identify scenarios that can be provided to the people that will work with customers. The challenge there is obviously the flexibility against productivity balance. Now that flexibility quite often comes with an expense or an issue with KPIs identification, right? How you measure how successful your team is. Sometimes you get more flexible, but then you have to create KPIs that will capture actually the success from a different point of view. Sometimes you get towards a more predictable way of working, and that obviously influences the KPIs you want to set up. But from a security perspective, flexibility is unfortunately quite important nowadays, because the way people use the product, there is almost no one using the product in the same way as the others, and that needs to be reflected in the customer success organizations, and
Right.
and it is quite a, and that's again my personal opinion, but it is quite a hard one to reach when you try to measure performance of a team, but you have to keep the flexibility of the team.
But it does mean, of course, on the plus side, looked at from the perspective of the CSM, it does mean that the CSM is a very important part of the process.
100%.
It's not a one size fits all. Here you go, press the start button and it'll auto load and you're away situation here. There's a lot of advice based upon hard earned experience that needs to go into making decisions, right? And the customer is going to know their situation far better than we can ever know it, because they live in it and have done for years. But similarly, what the CSM brings, in my opinion, and obviously I would love your opinion on this, what the CSM brings is an understanding of the product that the customer can't possibly have because they're new to the product. So it's not the same knowledge as, let's say, a product specialist, which is a technical knowledge about, setup and options. It's more of a business awareness knowledge of the product, as in the art of the possible.
That's 100% correct. The CSM in certain scenarios becomes critical, especially when it comes to situations where you get multiple stakeholders, and you have to understand what every stakeholder wants out of that situation.
Yeah.
Which is
here to do the systems engineer's job, right?
No, not at all. Because when you are in front of your C-level, you have to talk about obviously what will benefit the company, and in that case for security is how you measure your security posture, how you mature your security motion and stuff like that. For the technical people, obviously you want to discuss how they could reduce the number of clicks that they make on the product, and in the middle you have all the levels of grays that you can imagine, with obviously the operations people saying, okay, how do we measure the quality of the service? And then you have obviously the buying people or the people that look at some other parts where you have to be able to link your internal departments to these departments and make sure that the conversation starts there. And that's where you obviously need to build up your network inside your company, which is extremely important.
Because again, I mean, we're not the SE, we're not the field engineer or the implementation engineer. We're not an engineer. Okay. And even if we are, that's not the role that we're in. Okay. So our role is not as an engineer, even if we've got that background, we shouldn't be doing it. So that effectively, once we have had the conversations with the business leaders within the customer organization, we're helping them to make high quality, value-based judgments based upon good quality data and information, our experiences of coming across similar situations in other companies that have got the same sorts of challenges and have purchased the same products, and we're helping them to make the right decisions about what to do. We're not necessarily going to get involved in the nitty-gritty of how to do it. That's what we pass across to the people with the funny little propellers on the top of their heads.
That's a good picture to have in mind. But you have to have, I guess, the capability of being analytical enough as a CSM.
Right. So you got to be technical enough, haven't you, as well? Right. You've got to know the art of the possible, and not be, not misunderstanding what is practical as well. So you've got to have a foot in the technical world, right?
That's correct. You have to have an understanding of what is the art of the possible, which doesn't necessarily mean your background will absolutely be technical. In fact, in my experience, one of the teams I worked with had the right balance between non-technical and technical people. So we, at a certain point in a past experience, we hired people that were project management focused, some people that were relationship focused, some other people that were technical focused on the technical bit. And that osmosis card played on the team obviously worked brilliantly well, because it's so difficult to find somebody that has all the characteristics that are needed to.
Of course. But I would say this, and I don't know if you'd agree, but I'm pretty sure you will, right? Is in a technology company, the easy bit is the technology.
That's absolutely correct. And that's what you can learn in a technology company. So if you jump in a CS
the easiest
position,
part to transfer as well. We've got, Cisco's got 1 or 2 courses on technology up its sleeve to train people in.
Just two.
Just a couple of certifications to get through. So, and what would you say? You talked about technical. You talked also about soft skills, and you also mentioned a couple of other things. What about business skills? What about understanding how businesses work and what a business outcome is, and what, how to measure ROI and how business leaders think? How important is that for a CSM, in your opinion?
It's one of the most important parts, and it's unfortunate that a CS role has so many sides to it.
It does, doesn't it? Lots of aspects.
Exactly, and all are almost equally important.
I just thought of a good. We're like well-cut diamonds.
Oh, that's a good one. I'll use that for. I'll use that in my next discussion for my pay rise. But no, jokes apart, business outcomes is absolutely important, because when you jump into discussions around how you measure your security posture and how the investment, because that's the other challenge in security. Sorry if I'm jumping back a little bit, but
no, go for it.
In the security industry in general has an inherited problem, that is, you deploy a product and you haven't got a real, this is your customer that have bought 10 more products because you deployed a firewall, or you have 10 new
What you're talking
customers.
about is the so what of security
Yes,
is measured very differently to the so what of most products that you purchase. What you want out of most products is you want to use it lots.
exactly.
Right, to do things, right? And the more things you do with it, the better. Of course, security is like, it's more like insurance, isn't it?
Exactly, and that's where I was heading, because
Okay.
the classic phrase was that I heard in my past experience with talking to customers is, this product hasn't produced any alarms. And
Yeah,
my
let's get rid
my
of it.
my counter argument is obviously, well, that's a good thing, because
Right.
your network is quite secure. Have you tried to, run a penetration testing exercise or something like that that will tell you whether it works or not, whether it is protecting you or not? And most importantly, have you considered the possibility of a data breach, how much loss you will get from that data breach, and how much, if you stop
And
the
the cost
company.
of that in
Exactly.
various ways, financial or otherwise. Yeah, reputation, so on.
And the other argument is how much. Nowadays, most companies are looking at cyber insurance, which is the next big thing. How much your premium is decreasing based on some of the measurement that some of the cybersecurity insurances are providing. So there are these two type of arguments that
Well,
one could use.
yeah. So, Dario, in your opinion, how many major cyber breaches are too many?
Well, even one is too many.
Right.
Um,
So therefore, if it's not ever registered yet, that doesn't mean you want to get rid of it, right?
Yeah, yeah, but business requirements change every day, and so networks need to change every day. That is without a doubt a truth. But that's where the CS role comes into play, and that's where, in a life cycle, you get to help, or at least the team you used to help um, customers in the evolution of their networks and the evolution of their security policies, the evolution of their KPIs, how they were measuring their
Yeah.
security posture, and decisions on what will look like the network in the future.
Right. So I'd like to follow up on that, if I may, and sort of bring in
Yes.
a couple of questions around that. So, um, the role of the customer success manager, specifically within security, now looking at you coming in to a customer who has made the decision, we're going to go with Cisco for our security, or for a major part of our security at least, or a Cisco focused solution. And therefore we've got Dario in as the customer success manager. Typically, then, how are you going to kick off with the customer, and what process are you going to go through with the customer to try and help them the best that you can?
So in the various iterations that we have used in the team, one of those that worked best is to make sure that all the customers, independently whether it's your top range customer or your other customers, you have to have an onboarding first contact type of session
Mhm.
that kicks off the life cycle. The life cycle needs to be planned, and the life cycle needs to have input from all the parties that are collaborating in the journey. So
Mhm.
again, it's not a one man job. CS in general, it's a whole team, and quite often it's not even just the vendor side of the team, but it's also the vendor plus partner plus customer plus others, type of journey. But when you start discussing about life cycle, you have a template for a journey for the product where you highlight what has worked and why we have designed that life cycle based on the characteristics of the product. Once that life cycle has been designed, you obviously, a CS manager or CS role goes to talk with all the stakeholders and says, okay, this is what we have designed. There might be different variations of it. What would work best for you? And that's where we have seen the trust starts to happen, and the type of the listening exercise, if you want, that you put in at the very beginning of the discussions comes handy in the whole life cycle, because that moment where your customer or your user of the product will express everything he's got in terms of requirements is the moment where you have to make sure you remember this for the whole life that the customer uses the product, because that's what they want to get out of the product.
So we're going to be hitting their comfort zone and their hotspots by effectively feeding back to them the plan of action that we have in mind that we'd like them to validate and agree upon with us is one that is completely and profoundly based upon what they have told us is their challenges, their opportunities, their outcome requirements, their needs.
That's absolutely correct. And one thing
this
I
what gets their
omitted.
buy-in effectively.
Yeah. And one thing I omitted is when you
Yes.
establish the plan, you have also to describe which stakeholders in which scenario will come into the game. So
who's going to be responsible and accountable and in authority, and who's going to be reported to at what stage, who's going to give sanctions for moving from phase 1 to phase 2, these sorts of considerations, who's actually going to do it,
accountability. Accountability is something extremely important in CX. Okay. And you can see that from a CS perspective in front of the customers, but you can also see that I would say on the back end, but in reality it's the whole corporate, as we were saying, the whole corporate has to be customer success focused in order to have that switch.
Yes, we're leading it, but obviously the philosophy covers everybody.
That's correct, and especially the internal organization needs to be accountable when it comes to decision making and life cycle processes. That's something that is really close to my heart. Through the various companies I've worked with and for, I found this sometimes challenging when there are certain setups or scenarios where people make decisions, but they are not accountable for those decisions. That's where the problem comes up, because we want to make a decision, make sure it works, and most importantly, because of that trust part, if the decision was wrong, just say it. It's wrong. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let's make a change. Let's work together. Listen to the feedback, and apply the change all together. This type of mindset I have seen being very successful in general.
No, I would agree with you. And again, it comes back to trust, and mistakes can be made without loss of trust, but cover-ups that get disclosed will always breach trust.
110% on this.
Right. So look, what I feel we've said at the moment, in terms of the life cycle, is and the role of the CSM within that is before we start opening our mouths too much and talking to the customer, we're actually doing a lot of listening. We're doing a lot of research and understanding, gathering that information in from internal sources, direct from the customer as well, making sense of it, and building a plan for the engagement.
That's
which
correct.
we will then take to the customer as a proposal for, this is how I recommend we work together. Let's work through it, discuss it, make sure you're comfortable with it, and effectively let both, and this is my bit now, I mean, you may or may not agree, but let's, if not actually, but at least conceptually, let's sign a contract between you and me as to how we're going to work together.
I totally agree with you, and that's the type of attitude I try to instill in the teams I've led, and it has worked well. It has worked
because we
really
get this
well.
ownership thing again that you were talking about, and that
Yes.
also is sort of so important. If they don't own it, if it's like if they are passive and expect us to actively make everything happen, it ain't going to happen. Similarly, obviously, we've got to play our role as well, but we've got to make sure that they own it, because we're like a typical we're consultants. Okay, a consultant is paid for their advice. They are executives. An executive is paid to make decisions.
Correct, and decision needs to be made based on data,
and on best advice.
Yes, and
that's how the relationship works. They've got to make the decisions. We've got to help them make the decisions. We don't make the decisions for them. Okay, they've got to make them. But what we've got to do is give them the information they need to make wise choices. That's how 100%. I see it. Obviously, it's not just us, but I mean, but nevertheless. So, okay, so let's move on just from a time point of view. So let's go further into the life cycle now.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gone through, let's say, the researching, the preparing, the contract signing, if I can put it that way, and the basic initial onboarding of making them aware. So let's move into the meat of adoption. How in this world of security, what's the role of the CSM in this all important adoption part of the life cycle?
So the best way I can describe it, and I have again pushed the teams and show the results, is try to identify a way of measuring or gathering the data that will guide the decision on your best next step. So if a customer opens up and describes the next evolution of the network, based on frameworks that are openly available, you can obviously project what will be the best outcomes based on decisions that you can make and scenarios. And having decisions based on those data obviously helps, from one side, guarantee that you are making the best decision for that moment in time. Obviously, probably won't be the best decision for forever because things change so quickly now, but it will be the best decision in that moment.
Yeah.
And then may build up again that continuous relationship and trust that is so vital in security. It's not going to be a personal opinion with two people agreeing. It's going to be a framework on which you base your decision based on future scenarios, again fed by the evolution of the corporate. So it's that guidance that will guide the decision, and that again brings us into how you measure probably the success of the teams. Because if you use a standard framework, you can predict how your product is going to be evolving inside customers, and how much development effort and how much relationship effort needs to be put into the product and into the team in order to follow through the life cycle. In the past, what I've seen is obviously you in the industry you have up and downs as everything and everybody. But what I've noticed is that when you really put effort in sitting down and discussing about the framework that the customers want to use and discussing about where the customers want to go based on their own evolution. And when you sit down with the product management and you say, okay, where do you want to go with the product? You sit down with the rest of the company and you say, okay, where are we going with the 6 word? When you bring all these together, at that point you can suggest the best next step for customers as a CS. I know it's a lot to take in, but it's one of the reasons why I say the CS has many parts that needs to be put together in a
but
single.
adopting a framework, a security framework, or encouraging the customer to adopt a security framework enables you to go further faster, right? Because you're
Correct.
not having to make it up as you go along, right? You are referencing best practice that's already in place, which allows you to engender a greater degree again of trust and from the customer, because it's not just you saying this is the right way of doing it, this is best practice, but then also it allows you to go to help them to maximize the value and to increase or to reduce the time to value, if you like, increase the overall value through being more productive in working, which is what a good framework should do, right?
Yes, and it helps also with an additional point, which is very common in the industry nowadays. Most vendors have multi-product portfolios in general.
Yeah.
And when it comes to multi-product, you obviously have people that like one product more than another. That's natural. That's human. But with frameworks, you go away from that personal preference and you
Very
jump
good point.
into objectivity.
Absolutely. And security is all about the gaps, isn't it? Right? It's
Correct.
the bits that fall in between products A and B.
Correct. and you'll never get it all in one product. Never, ever.
Never. No, absolutely. And if you did, then of course that would then be the target for everybody anyway, right?
See, well, I don't want to bring in too much pressure on a single entity, but
Right.
the more market share you have, the more likely you will get attacks.
The more out there you are. Yeah, absolutely right. So, okay. So I wanted to finish. We've got about another sort of couple of minutes before we go to questions. Just wanted to finish on something that I think is always important for every CSM, and actually is sometimes really hard. Is I want to talk about measurement. So you've mentioned KPIs a couple of times, and I've deliberately not gone there with you as yet, because I've been saving it up. So KPIs, as we've said, it's a little bit weird in the world of security as a start point, because it's not about numbers of logins or features and functions used. So tell me a little bit about, in the world of security, how does the CSM measure value, as in customer value?
So from a vendor perspective, I've seen different scenarios. I've seen measuring renewals, customer retention.
But that's not helping the customer, right? I mean, value to the customer.
That's
customer
correct.
does not. Yeah, the customer doesn't care less how well you're doing.
Yep, and that's where I was heading. In fact, with CX, SAT, and NPS. But that's again not measuring exactly how much a return of investment.
That's value for the supplier, isn't it? That helps us.
Correct. And you can. Unfortunately, there isn't a one-off framework that you can use to measure KPIs for customer success management in security. but you have a few pointers here and there, right? You can measure. We have seen successful outcomes from measuring how many scenarios or use cases a customer implements from a product, and that's how you can measure success for implementation and adoption. Most importantly, adoption. The other part that we look at is the sensibility of the products and the areas of the network that are covered. Because if a product is adopted well, it will cover most part of the network in security in general. And that this can be questionable for some products, but in general speaking, the wider the coverage, the better the adoption.
Sure. And I think also there may be another issue here, another problem for you, a challenge for the CSM, which is that sometimes not all customers are going to want to give you the data about usage that will help you to understand that usage in the first place, for reasons that I said earlier. In fact, they may not, their insurer, for example, may not even allow them to.
That's where the ability of the customer success person comes into play, because you always get a pointer here and there to understand whether the product is widely adopted or not.
No.
One can be the number of support cases that the customers raise. The other signal is the number of questions that they ask to the customer success person.
Right.
So, there are different level of sensibility that you can turn on or off. And also this is influenced by how easily it is to talk to the customer success person. Now, the easier it is to talk to a person, the greater the adoption will be typically. But what it happens is that you lose some of the controls on the provider or supplier side, because it's easy to make a number, call up a person, and talk to that person. It's more difficult to open a case and go through an automated system that will show you the art of the possible based on common scenarios projected on the type of vertical that you work in. I'm thinking about automated customer success management tools. It's always a trade-off. And what's really important, in my opinion, is making sure that for a specific team based on a specific type of specialty, and even in security there are different parts, you sit down with a common frame, you sit down and discuss a common framework or common approach on which you will be measured. And that can be, as an example, okay, all your customers will have to use the MITRE framework as an example, to understand scenarios.
Right. So how well have they actually got through that framework and ticked the boxes, as it were, to say yes, we follow best practice?
Correct.
And we can prove we've done so. All right. So look, Dario, we've literally got I think 1 minute left now. We don't have many. We don't have many people with us actually today. I think because it's quite specialist, but it's a shame, because I think this has been an absolutely excellent conversation, and I would suggest that anyone who is in security, should listen to this. I think there's been a lot of great information and advice being handed down, but I just want to throw it open to questions, literally just for the last minute. I mean, we are actually now on time to end, but I did have one question come in, sent to me privately, so I'll ask you that one, and we'll see if any other questions come in the meantime. And this question is saying, a lot of security is not about the product, it's about the users. How do you as a CSM ensure that the users are actually doing things right? So I'm assuming that what's meant here is things like, like trailing through the door, where you've got to have a badge to get through this door, but somebody's behind you, so you leave it open for them, or not logging off when you're logged into your laptop, or that type of thing. Is what I assume is being talked about. It's the people who make things secure. Thoughts?
Yeah. So the one of the hardest questions of life, really. But what is, so from a provider perspective, it's all about awareness, and all the companies I worked for obviously have had some sort of training to increase awareness. That is one step. Obviously, depending on what type of products you supply and what type of life cycle journeys you jump into, you have different levels of security and awareness. But what is extremely important, again, it goes down to the frameworks. Make sure you measure your security posture. Let the process drive your decisions based on the frameworks that you want to adopt, because security is so vast, you will always forget one point, and defenders have millions of points that they have to protect. Attackers need only one to get through. So trust the process, get through it, and make sure you collaborate in case of breaches in order to remediate as soon as possible, because it's not a matter of whether it happens, but when it happens. Be ready.
A good point to finish on. Thank you, Dario.
Thank you.
Gerald, if you could put in the evaluation form link up. So for those who are here, would love you please just to complete the evaluation. Let us know what you think of today's session. I personally think this has been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Time's actually flown by. I don't know about you, Dario. Feels like 5 minutes since we started, and there's so much more that we could be saying. I don't know if Gerald's actually still here to put that in. If not, let me just get the training evaluation form if I can. There we go. I'll put it in myself. Oh, there we go. He's put it in now. But anyway, there it is. Please don't forget, we run these once a month, the coffee bar conversations. Another great conversation next month. For this one, I want to thank my guest very, very much indeed, Dario Cavallaro, leader, Customer Success Security Group at Cisco EMEA. I think this has been a really interesting conversation about customer success in the security industry. I hope if you've been watching and listening, you've been enjoying it as well. So, Dario, thank you.
Thank you.
I hope to have you back on again sometime, because I think there's more we could talk about. And wish everybody a great rest of the day and look forward to the next session.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.